Welcome back to A Powerless Mage Presents The Deep Dive. This is the space where we stop treating knowledge like some dry lecture and start treating it like a real treasure hunt. We take the source material that you provide, we cut through all the noise, all the emotional static, and we try to pull out the absolute core knowledge nuggets, the kinds of things that can actually transform how you see the world and, maybe even more importantly, how you see yourself.
And today we are walking right into what the sources themselves call a pretty significant landmine field, the concept of diversity. It has just become such a lightning rod word in modern life, hasn't it?
That is truly the understatement of the decade. I mean, when you hear the word diversity today, the reaction is almost never neutral. You find yourself kind of bracing for a political lecture or, you're anticipating a conflict, preparing for an argument, just one of those modern buzzwords that generates these incredibly strong, sometimes visceral feelings. And those feelings are often tied up with deeply held prejudices or anxieties about things like racial culture or socioeconomic status or even gender identity.
Exactly. And the source material really highlights the central problem with talking about this topic right now. When something generates such powerful, strong emotional reactions, we tend to confuse what it is for what it makes us feel.
That's a great point.
The emotion becomes the definition. So if a concept makes us feel, say, uncomfortable, we just assume the concept itself is flawed or dangerous. We don't really stop to question why we crave that comfortable simplicity in the first place.
And that confusion is precisely what we are here to dismantle. Our mission in this deep dive is to move entirely past that emotional friction, past all the societal confusion, and just explore the factual inherent nature of diversity as a principle of reality. We're going to look at it objectively, using the framework you provided, and explore what it is, not just what it makes us feel.
So let's nail down the foundation. We're going straight to the core dictionary definition that was in your sources. Diversity is defined as the condition of having or being composed of differing elements.
Simple, direct, and almost criminally overlooked in most modern discussions.
It is simple, but crucially, it's also implicit. The definition suggests that this state of difference is just a natural, inherent quality of existence. We are talking about inherent complexity. We're not talking about a mandated policy or, some government regulation. We're talking about reality itself. And for you, the learner, if you are currently grappling with some kind of personal dissatisfaction, feeling like your unique differences are obstacles, we need to show you the aha moments. We need to demonstrate how this inherent complexity, this existence of differing unique elements, is actually the source of all growth, all strength, and ultimately the solution to the problems you're struggling with right now.
And that is the connection we really want you to internalize today. If you're feeling frustrated or stuck or dissatisfied because you feel like you just don't quite fit the mold, this deep dive is specifically for you. We're pulling out the core concepts from the material you shared that can fundamentally change how you view your own uniqueness, to reframe it as a feature, not a bug, of this rich, complex world all around us.
Before we dive into the details of the sources, let's just start with a crucial moment of reflection. When you hear that word diversity, what is the very first immediate feeling that comes up for you? Is it resistance? Maybe exhaustion from hearing about it so much? Or is it genuine curiosity or even just confusion? And maybe more importantly, why might that immediate emotional feeling be obscuring the simple, factual, inherent definition that we just provided? Hold that thought. We will definitely be coming back to it later.
Okay, let's unpack this with a sledgehammer. We're going to start by just destroying the illusion that anything in this universe is truly identical, because that right there is the foundation of all the dissatisfaction we feel when we try to conform. It's an illusion we've all just bought into because of, linguistic convenience.
It's so deeply ingrained in our language, yes. We have sayings like 2 peas in a pod or...
Like 2 drops of water.
Exactly, like 2 drops of water. We use that to refer to things being identical, meaning, they're indistinguishable. But the sources make it explicitly clear. There is nothing identical in nature.
And this is where we need to stop and really, really analyze that single drop of water. When we talk about it conversationally, we abstract it. We just say, oh, it's just water. But if you zoom in, the complexity is... it's immediate and it's overwhelming. It is anything but simple.
That's right. When we say 2 drops of water appear identical to the naked eye, we're just applying a very surface-level human measurement of uniformity. But we're completely ignoring the physics and the chemistry. The sources require us to look much deeper. These two drops of water differ fundamentally. They differ in structure, in the precise number and location of air bubbles trapped inside them, in their exact size down to the nanometer, their unique ratio of dissolved minerals, and critically, in their molecular organization.
Okay, let's focus on that last part. Molecular organization.
All right,
This
yeah.
isn't just poetry. This is actual physics. Because water molecules are constantly moving, constantly reacting based on thermal energy in their environment. They're governed by the laws of thermodynamics, specifically the law of entropy. And entropy ensures that every system, including a drop of water, constantly seeks a greater state of disorder.
Therefore, even if you could hypothetically synthesize 2 drops of pure H2O at the exact same time, the immediate, constant thermal micro-movements of those molecules, the subtle differences in local pressure, the random quantum movements, they ensure they diverge instantly. One drop might have a momentary cluster of molecules in one formation, while the other drop has a completely different configuration. They cannot occupy the same state at the same time. They are essentially completely different individuals, each behaving according to its own unique parameters.
That's a profound thought. Individuality isn't some complex state we eventually achieve after years of growth. It's something that's inherent from the smallest, most foundational scale of existence. You actually can't escape difference. And the sources offer this fascinating, very concrete challenge to prove this universal uniqueness.
Yes, the author suggests trying to find identical things in the natural world. It sounds like an easy task, but it proves to be philosophically and practically impossible. Try to find 2 identical leaves on a single tree, let alone 2 leaves identical across the entire species. You'll notice differences in vein patterns, exposure to sunlight, insect damage, the curvature of their growth. It's endless.
Or take the challenge to the beach. You could spend your entire life on that beach with a high-powered microscope, and you will never find 2 grains of sand that are truly the same. Every single one has a unique history of erosion, a unique crystalline fracture pattern, a unique mix of chemical impurities absorbed over millennia. If we were being honest, we shouldn't call it sand. We should call it a collection of unique geological narratives. It is an immediate, irrefutable argument against the very concept of absolute uniformity.
And this overwhelming realization that nature just rejects perfect sameness. It brings us to this powerful, almost spiritual observation from the source's author's mother. She was deeply religious and observant, and she said, God hates uniformity.
Wow, that phrase really sticks with you. It sticks with you precisely because it perfectly encapsulates the observation of the physical world. God hates uniformity. It suggests that the very act of creation is an act of differentiating, of individualizing. If every single being, every single object is unique and different, that means difference is not an anomaly. It's not a mistake or a distraction. Difference is the fundamental foundational rule of the universe.
And this realization it's deeply persuasive for anyone feeling dissatisfied or out of place. If you, the learner, feel frustrated because you believe you don't fit some predetermined societal mold, or because you believe you should be like everyone else to succeed, you have to understand this. The concept of the mold itself is a fiction. It's a human invention. Your unique difference, your specific blend of characteristics, is not a flaw. It is a fundamental, essential feature of the universe's own design, just like the unique history of a grain of sand.
But here's the friction, right? If everything is unique, why does society demand so much conformity? Why do we have standardized tests and standardized products and standardized work hours? If I'm a unique individual, why must I drive on the right side of the road like everyone else?
That's a brilliant question because it really shows the tension between nature and human organization. We'll explore that more in the next section, but for now, just recognize that internal conflict. Think about that moment of self-criticism when you look at yourself and say, why can't I be more extroverted or more mathematically inclined or more patient like so-and-so? What you're actually doing is demanding that you deny the individual specific structure that the universe created for you. You're demanding uniformity in a system that fundamentally rejects it. You're fighting physics.
And the irony is just profound. In chasing that uniformity, that abstract ideal of normal or ideal, we're chasing an abstract concept that is completely divorced from reality. And that pursuit inevitably leads to frustration and dissatisfaction because we are fighting the very nature of existence. We exhaust ourselves trying to file off our own unique edges to fit into some standardized box.
True strength and true satisfaction. They don't come from filing those edges down. They come from understanding and operating within our unique individuality. Our current state of being, your mix of skills, your background, your personality quirks, your physical structure, your specific experiences, it's all a unique, non-replicable signature. It is more complex and singular than any drop of water or grain of sand. And embracing that inherent complexity is step one toward finding a real solution to dissatisfaction. It's moving from resistance to acceptance.
So, given that the universe itself thrives on individual uniqueness and that conformity is literally a fight against reality, we have to ask you to deeply reflect on this. In what area of your life are you currently trying to force yourself into a shape or an identity that nature has already rejected? Is it a career path that doesn't fit your specific skill set, maybe a social role that contradicts your personality, or even just trying to follow some generalized path to happiness that ignores your specific needs? Identifying where you're fighting complexity in favor of a fictional, simple mold is the essential first step toward genuine self-acceptance and ultimately success.
Now, that's a powerful challenge, and that leads us perfectly into section 2. If uniformity doesn't exist in nature, where did this powerful, almost gravitational pull toward conformity come from?
Here's where it gets really interesting. The answer is, we invented it.
Yeah.
Uniformity is not a cosmic law. It's a necessary tool we created, a mental mechanism to manage the overwhelming complexity of reality.
Yes, uniformity, or the idea of it, is explicitly called a mental construct in the source material. We need it because reality, as we just established, is far too detailed, too granular, too unique to handle in its raw form. It's a way to simplify our perception of the world and the things in it. And we need this simplification to function efficiently, especially in large groups.
Let's go back to that sand example, but let's apply a layer of human convenience to it. When you look at an entire beach, you don't stop and inspect 10 million individual grains, noting their unique crystalline structures. That would take forever. You look at the whole expanse and you say, it's just sand. And that's incredibly efficient. It allows your brain to categorize, simplify, and move on to more important, immediate tasks like navigating a crowd or making a decision.
Precisely. We engage in abstraction and grouping. When we say it's just sand, we are using an abstract label that allows us to treat those 10 million unique grains as a single interchangeable unit. We fall into the mental trap of believing, for the sake of utility, that all sand is equal. This mental construct, this abstraction, is essential for basic communication, for manufacturing, for classification. But it's dangerously misleading if we confuse the simplified label with the complex reality underneath it.
Abstraction isn't inherently bad. It's how we build civilization. I mean, think about currency. A $5 bill is a massive abstraction. It represents a promise of value and labor and economic energy, but the paper itself is just unique cellulose fibers. We agree to treat all $5 bills as uniform, equal units, even though each one is uniquely worn or folded or damaged. That agreement is the necessary mental construct that allows trade to even happen.
And this mental shorthand becomes absolutely critical when we start creating concepts that only exist in the abstract. Things like rules, laws, categories, and identities. To set order in society, to manage millions of people living in close proximity, we are required to abstract things and group them.
We create categories, driver's licenses, tax brackets, legal responsibilities, all based on simplified grouped identities. And this is necessary for a functional society. Otherwise, we'd have 8 billion unique traffic laws, and no one would be able to drive anywhere. The problem isn't the rule. The problem is when we forget the rule is only a simplification.
The danger zone emerges, however, when this necessary grouping or abstraction, which was designed merely for order and utility, starts to break down or prove inefficient when it comes up against actual, messy reality. This happens when our simplified mental construct encounters one of those 8 billion unique individuals or one of those unique grains of sand that doesn't quite fit the label we've given it.
That's the key conflict, isn't it? When our mental construct of order, our simplified rule, meets the inherent messy diversity of the world. We perceive that difference not as a unique reality, but as an obstacle to the established preferred order. We see it as friction, or worse, as a threat.
And what's the emotional result? The source explains it perfectly. We respond with resentment. We take with resentment those things we identify as different from us, whether it is a difficult coworker, a confusing new social situation, or our own strange, complex personality. Why? Because that difference threatens the stability of the simple mental structure we rely on. We resist complexity because complexity requires more effort, more resources, and it potentially challenges the core validity of our existing rigid rules.
And this applies so profoundly to personal dissatisfaction. If you have an internal rule that says a successful person looks like X, works like X, and achieves Y by age Z, and your actual reality, your inherent nature, looks like Y prime, you feel resentment toward Y prime, that is, toward yourself. You perceive your own unique identity, your specific abilities and limitations as an obstacle to the simplified, rigid success rule you've adopted.
The rigid mental rule set, that abstraction of what you should be, is what causes the frustration. You are resisting the complexity of your own reality in favor of a simpler, but ultimately fiction-based mental rule. The irony is we crave simplicity because complexity feels overwhelming. It leads to anxiety and uncertainty. But at the same time, we yearn for richness, depth, and a meaningful life.
But hold on, why should I choose complexity? You said it yourself. Complexity requires more effort and potentially leads to anxiety. If I can maintain a simple, orderly life, a simple mental structure, I reduce my exposure to disappointment and exhaustion. Isn't resentment just a natural human reaction to being asked to put in unnecessary effort? Why should I choose the hard path of managing complexity?
That is the exact internal negotiation that keeps people stuck. Simplicity offers the superficial comfort of predictability. If everything is uniform, nothing surprises me. But the source material makes a critical point here. The moment we insist on rigid uniformity in our jobs, our relationships, or our personal identities, we sacrifice the very richness, resilience, and potential we desire. Simplicity is a trade-off. You trade adaptability and depth for the superficial comfort of predictability.
And when the unpredictable reality inevitably shows up, when the economy changes, when your unique personal trait suddenly becomes valuable, or when the rules you followed just stop working, you blame the complexity, the difference, instead of questioning the rigidity of your own simplifying mental constructs.
This is a crucial pivot point. If we can internalize that uniformity is just a human tool for organizing a convenient label and not a cosmic law, we can begin to accept complexity as the true state of play. And this allows us to shift our internal posture from resistance and resentment to strategic management.
The moment you stop seeing your unique challenges, or the unique challenges presented by someone else, as an obstacle that shouldn't exist, and start seeing them as the necessary components of reality that must be utilized, your whole perspective shifts. You stop fighting the fundamental physics of the universe and you start using them.
So think about a challenge you face right now. Maybe it's a difficult project at work that requires multiple conflicting skill sets. Maybe a complex relationship with a family member or a personal struggle with an ability you wish you didn't have. Are you focusing on the difference or complexity of that situation as an obstacle that shouldn't be there? Or can you reframe it as a necessary, non-negotiable part of the reality you must accept and strategically manage? That reframing is where power truly begins.
That brings us beautifully and powerfully to Section 3, the untapped power of richness and complexity. So, if difference inherently adds complexity, and we now understand that complexity is reality's default setting, then it must dramatically increase potential, provided we can manage it.
Absolutely. The source material emphasizes this dramatically. Diversity provides potential for growth, strength, and learning. This is the ultimate persuasive argument. The more diverse something is, the more complex it is, but the richer, stronger, and more resilient it becomes. Complexity and richness are inextricably linked in a system designed for survival and evolution.
Let's define that link. When a system is uniform, it's inherently brittle. If the one rule it follows breaks, the entire system just collapses. But when a system is diverse, it has built-in redundancy and multiple pathways to a solution. That complexity, while it's messy to organize, makes the system fundamentally more robust.
We can illustrate this with the beautiful analogies provided in the sources, starting with art, because it's so immediately relatable to the concept of value. Imagine a painting that has only one color, say, a flat gray, without any nuances or shades.
Right, visualize that. It might be aesthetically pure or, orderly, but it's also aesthetically and conceptually shallow. It tells you nothing about depth or perspective or feeling. It's easy to execute, but it conveys almost zero information.
Now, visualize the same picture rendered with all the colors of the spectrum. The simple act of introducing diversity of color, the complexity of light and pigment allows for shading, for shadows, for the illusion of three dimensions. More colors create a picture that is certainly more complex to execute and to analyze, but it's infinitely closer to reality. It's richer, deeper, and conveys far more information, context, and emotion. The value of that second painting is exponentially higher simply because it embraced complexity.
The single color is easy. It's easy to define and manage. But the spectrum, that complex diversity of light and pigment, is what creates depth, shadows, context, and meaning. It is where the value truly lies. The initial discomfort of managing 100 colors instead of just one is a tiny price to pay for the massive increase in value and fidelity to reality.
And if that still feels a bit subjective, because art is subjective, let's use an example that is much more tangible and less debatable.
Yeah.
The library analogy. This one really illustrates how complexity outweighs mere quantity.
I think this is the most powerful metaphor for the listener seeking personal and professional growth. Imagine a library that has 10 million books on its shelves. That's a massive collection. But here's the catch. Every single one of those 10 million books is a copy of the same single textbook. Let's say it's chemistry for beginners.
Now the question is, does it matter if this library has 10 million copies or 100 million copies? No. The sheer volume is completely meaningless when the variety is zero. The only thing you can possibly learn from that place is basic chemistry, and your ability to solve complex, non-chemistry-related problems is exactly zero. Its value is rigidly limited by its uniformity.
The value of that library doesn't come from the quantity of cellulose, it comes from the variety of titles. The moment you start adding unique titles, history, philosophy, engineering, fiction, biographies, the value of that institution just skyrockets. The more different titles you add, the more diverse the collection, the richer its value becomes. It ceases to be a storage facility and becomes a true source of learning, connection, and problem-solving power.
And that metaphor translates directly to your own life and the communities or teams you're a part of. A community of people who all think the same, have the same background, and the exact same skill set is, effectively, a library full of copies of chemistry for beginners. It can only solve one type of problem, and when that problem evolves, the community breaks.
But introduce someone with a completely different perspective, a new title, like anthropology or computer science, and suddenly you have the potential for innovation, for resilience, for entirely new solutions that the homogeneous group couldn't even conceive of. That complexity is not an impediment, it's untapped wealth. The discomfort of learning a new perspective is minor compared to the explosive growth in problem-solving capability.
This realization that diversity is complex but demonstrably richer applies not just philosophically but in hard, practical terms, especially when we analyze the economic and practical inefficiency of segregation. The source material forces us to look at this concept not through an emotional lens, but through a lens of pragmatic resource allocation.
This moves us into a stark, counterintuitive logic that runs entirely against that simplicity mindset we talked about earlier. The core economic principle here is simple. A part is never more valuable than its whole, and artificially dividing the whole reduces its overall productive capacity.
That's the starting point. When we segregate, we are implementing an artificial boundary that limits the potential interaction and cross-pollination of the whole resource pool. The source author uses a simple color analogy, purples and cyans, to illustrate how self-defeating this can be from a purely practical standpoint, moving past identity politics and focusing purely on efficiency.
Let's expand on that market analogy. Assume a merchant produces a high-quality product aimed primarily at people they identify as purples. If they artificially segregate the market and prevent cyans from purchasing it, what have they really done? They haven't just created two separate markets, they've severely limited their total addressable market. If the product is high quality, it is fundamentally more profitable, more valuable to allow both groups to acquire it. Segregation limits the market, and so it limits the potential richness and scale of the entire economy.
And this concept applies even more acutely to human capital, which is directly relevant to finding solutions to professional dissatisfaction. Think about the most critical resource in any organization: talent.
Let's say a job requires a highly specific X ability. Maybe it's systems thinking or complex data analysis. If an employer artificially limits their search for this X ability only to people identified as purple, they are engaging in severe economic inefficiency. Why would they wait indefinitely for a person identified as purple to fill that role if a person identified as cyan possesses that exact same high-demand skill?
It is an irrational economic choice. It's driven by the adherence to a simplified mental order, the color-based categories, over the practical reality of value and competence. Waiting for the right color when the required skill already exists elsewhere is inefficient. It weakens the organization's competitiveness, and it limits the overall potential of the entire market because talent is being wasted or held back based on an arbitrary, non-performance-related category.
And the cost of this adherence to simplicity is measurable. Think about intellectual stagnation. If a group only hires people who fit the purple mold, they're limiting themselves to one intellectual framework, one history of experience. When a new problem arises, they only have the Chemistry for Beginners textbook to consult. The price of their uniformity is a complete lack of resilience in the face of change.
Segregation is something that goes directly against diversity. It makes the world easier to categorize, yes, because it maintains those simplified mental constructs we talked about, the comfort of the monochromatic painting. But here is the crucial takeaway, the persuasive summary from the source material itself, which must resonate with anyone looking for a more fulfilling life. Things that are worth it are complicated.
That is the ultimate challenge. If you were seeking a simple, effortless solution to a complex personal problem, like finding a satisfying career or building a resilient identity, you are effectively signing up for the Chemistry for Beginners library. You're consciously choosing the monochromatic painting, sacrificing potential depth for temporary ease.
Embracing complexity is embracing worth. It means accepting that your life, your skills, your relationships, and the world are fundamentally diverse, layered, and often messy. But that messiness is the source of all potential growth, innovation, and strength. You have to manage the difference, the nuance, and the complexity instead of resenting it as an obstacle to some fictional, simple ideal. That is the path to overcoming dissatisfaction.
So considering the richness that complexity brings and how it exponentially increases the value and utility of everything it touches, we have one final, deep question for you to mull over. What monochromatic painting, what simplistic, single-minded structure are you currently maintaining in your life that would be exponentially enriched if you embrace a different color or perspective? Is it your rigid definition of success, your limiting routine, or your exclusive choice of company? Where can you intentionally introduce productive complexity?
We've covered a lot of ground today. We moved from the factual definition of diversity and its innate role in the natural world, using physics and geology to prove that uniformity is a lie. We then discussed how uniformity is actually a simplified human tool designed for order, and how the resistance to difference is merely the emotional defense of that easy rule set.
And finally, we established that complexity, which difference guarantees, is a direct measure of potential and richness, providing far greater practical and economic value than brittle, simple structures. If you are genuinely seeking powerful, lasting solutions, you must seek complexity. You must seek the library with 10 million unique titles.
Now, for a final provocative thought for you to consider and explore on your own that builds directly on this material. If difference is essential for growth, where is the most challenging difference you face right now? The one that causes you the most resistance, the most anxiety, or the most resentment? And what profound growth is that specific challenge currently holding hostage until you choose to manage and utilize it?
That is the real deep dive that has to happen next, taking these concepts and applying them to your own unique, complex life. But don't simply take our word. Put everything you heard here to the test. Make this knowledge truly yours.
We invite you to share your ideas, your thoughts, and your experiences in the comment section below. Like this deep dive if you enjoyed it or if it was useful to you, and subscribe to learn more about similar topics and continue this journey with us.
Remember, the power is yours.